Masechtas Tainus, a lot of it, most of it, speaks about if there's no rain. The halachas of Tainus, you have to fast, when you fast, how often you fast. Again, Eretz Yisrael. As well as also there's a special tefillah when there's no rain. V'aneinu boirei olam. When I was a bacher in Eretz Yisrael, I remember the winter, it literally did not rain. And towards the end of the winter, they started saying, V'aneinu boirei olam, a tefillah. We'll see about it. We're going to learn. A lot of the Masechta speaks about it. The beginning, as we start now, the beginning blätter speak about how we ask for rain. Mentioned twice in Shemoneh Esrei. Once towards the beginning, in the bracha of Ata Gibor, we say Mashav U'Racha B'Yerd HaGeshem. And then again, in Baruch Aleinu, we say this, we ask Hashem V'sein Talamoter. So it's mentioned twice. Of course, now we're in the summer, it's neither. But when we talk about rain in Shemoneh Esrei, it's twice in Ata Gibor and also in Baruch Aleinu. It's very different when mentioned in Ata Gibor and when mentioned in the bracha of a saint in Baruch Aleinu. You see, Shemoneh Esrei, 18 brachas, now it's 19 brachas, is set up the following. The first 3 brachas is a shvach to the Rabbeinu Shalom. Like the Gemara in Bracha says, Dorash Reb Simloi La'olam Yesader Adam Shvacha Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When you talk to the Eibishter, first you say the shvach of Hashem, the first 3 brachas. Followed afterwards, you ask Hashem for what you need. So the first 3 brachas are shvach. After the first 3 brachas, Avos, Gvura, Ata Kadosh, then we start asking, Ata Chayni L'Adam Das, please give us Das, Slach Lanu, Rifa'elu, Baruch Aleinu, is all bakashas. Then we end the last 3 brachas of Shemoneh Esrei is Haidah, thanking Hashem for everything. So the first time we mention rain, Mashav Ruach, is a haskara. We're not asking for rain, we're mentioning rain. Because the first 3 brachas, we don't ask for anything, so we're mentioning rain. It's more shvach that the Eibishter, unbelievable, the Eibishter gives rain. The Saint Talamoter is a bakasha. With all the other bakashas, we're asking for rain. And that's Taka the Gemara right here in the beginning. The Gemara says, the Ktani maskirin gvuras geshama betchias hamesim. There's a haskara. We mention rain in the bracha of Ata Gibor. V'shoyalim, we ask Hashem for rain. The birchas Hashanim. We start now the Masechta, the first few blätter speak about the haskara of Mashav Ruach. And the second, starting Daf Yud, the Gemara speaks about when we start asking for rain in Eretz Yisrael from Zion, Cheshvan, Chutz La'aretz from around December 5th. So the Mishnah starts, when do you start saying the Masechta, when do you start saying Mashav Ruach? So these are machlokes tanoim. The Gemara brings more shitas, but these are machlokes. Shitas Rabbi Eliezer, as you start the first day SUKKOS. The Gemara discusses when, by night, by day. Though on a very side note, it's very interesting to start a haskara in the middle of the day. We do not find this elsewhere. To start in the middle of the day by Musaf, it's a separate discussion. Shitas Rabbi Eliezer is you start at the first day SUKKOS. Shitas Rabbi Yeshua is you start at the last day, Dahainu Shmini Atzeres. And Rabbi Yeshua says, you know why you should start at the last day? Even though Rabbi Eliezer says, maybe from Lula, from NISUCH HAMAYIM, you start the last day SUKKOS. Why? Because the whole SUKKOS, we want to sit in the sukkah. So even though it's a haskara, what are you even mentioning rain during SUKKOS? During SUKKOS, rain is actually a klala. We want to sit in the sukkah. Therefore, Shitas Rabbi Yeshua is that you start being mispal for rain the last day of SUKKOS. And that's lahalacha. Shmini Atzeres is when we start. Lahalacha, lamaisa, gepaskan, the Shulchan Aruch. Siman Kuf Yud Dalet Sif Aleph. That's when we start. Very interesting. These are smach, a connection, or you want to call it a raya, from this Shittis Rabbi Yeshua that we paskin like, that we start asking for rain, not asking, but even haskara of rain on Shmini Atzeres. But why not before? Because we have to sit in the sukkah. And what happened to Shmini Atzeres? Shmini Atzeres, you also have to sit in the sukkah. So really we should start maybe the day after Shmini Atzeres. Rabbi Yeshua says we start Shmini Atzeres because before it's a Simin Klala. And what's about Shmini Atzeres? Shmini Atzeres, you also sit in the sukkah. So if you ask me if you sit in the sukkah, the Gemara says you sit in the sukkah, and the Shulchan Aruch says you sit in the sukkah. However, there's a minig, which the minig is already brought in the Tur. The Tur actually says ve'enoi minig, but he brings that there's a minig in Klal Yisrael not to sit in the sukkah. So some want to bring a samach, and likely it's a medrash. I want to share with the olam the lashon medrash. Likely it's a mafurish medrash about not sitting in the sukkah Shmini Atzeres. Of course, if to sit or not to sit in the sukkah, you could go on for hours. That's not today's shiur, and that's not what we're learning here, Masechtas Tainis. But at least the connection to Shittis Rabbi Yeshua, lashon medrash Tanchuma, in Parshas Pinchas, b'yom hashmini, v'lama hetiru chachamim lipater min hasukkah b'yom tov ha'achron shel chag. Why did the chachamim allow lipater not to sit in the sukkah the last day of Yom Tov? So obviously, we're not talking about in Eretz Yisrael, because in Eretz Yisrael there's nothing that the chachamim pater to sit in the sukkah. In Eretz Yisrael, sukkah is 7 days, and the 8th day is a new Yom Tov Shmini Atzeres. In Chutz La'aretz, that it's Sveike de Yoima, so why don't we sit in the sukkah? Elakol Zayin Yemei Achag, the 7 days of Sukkos, we daven for mispalim tlom fatal, ubiyom teva achroin hoyim mispalim legeshamim. Like we have Shittis Rabbi Yeshua, we start davening for rain. Ulakach niftarim in sukkah, we leave, we don't sit in the sukkah. Shmini Atzeres kedeshi yispalu al geshamim b'leiv shalom. So that's why we don't sit in the sukkah. Pashtus, it's pretty clear, a medrash tanchuma.
That's if we hold like Rabbi Yeshua.
You're right. Lamaisa we do. You are right. The medrash is a Tana, and you're absolutely right. Obviously, this medrash, this Tana is going like Shittis Rabbi Yeshua. You're absolutely right. But let's say for us, la halacha, that we paskin like Rabbi Yeshua, this would be, I would say, a smach. What's the right word? A validation to the minig for those that don't sit. This medrash, I'm not a baki in medrash, but the Matei Ephraim brings about this of sitting and not sitting, and then on the bottom, the Elif, the one of the Haggais, the Elif Lambogain, brings these Mara Makoimis, including the medrash. Being that almost the whole pace of what we're learning this week, thank you Rabbi Yosef for setting up a pace that we could Be'ez Hashem have a mahalach way to finish Masechtas Tainis. Most of it speaks about the din of NISUCH HAMAYIM on SUKKOS. Of course it's connected to what we're learning, in particular as the Gemara speaks about, if you start by night, Shittis Rabbi Eliezer, and then the Gemara goes in a lot into NISUCH HAMAYIM. SUKKOS, there was a din NISUCH HAMAYIM. That's why the Simchas Beis HaShe'eva by night, they used to fill up the water for the NISUCH HAMAYIM. I would like to focus, it might be a bit, call it out of the box, but I would like to focus on the NISUCH HAMAYIM in general, and as we'll see in particular, how it connects to the Gemaras over here. Before NISUCH HAMAYIM, let's first look in the general Nesachim. What's the general Nesachim? NISUCH HAYAYIN. By every korban, not by every korban, by many korbanos. It's a part in Parshas Shlach. The Torah speaks about it. A korban oila, a TOMID that we brought every morning and every evening is an oila. When you brought that korban, a shlamim, you also brought a mincha, and you brought NISUCH HAMAYIM. You poured wine on the Mizbeach. The Psukim over there speak about the measurement, how much wine you manasach. That's the din of NISUCH HAMAYIM. There's another time that you bring NISUCH HAMAYIM, like the Torah says over there, Moyadim Yomtiv, Korbanos of Yomtiv, you bring NISUCH. When we daven Musaf, when we say the KORBAN Hayoim, so you say it, which is in the Torah, you brought NISUCH HAMAYIM. Of course, SUKKOS is no different, and we're going to go into the Psukim a little bit of SUKKOS, because that's what we're talking about over here, which also speaks about NISUCH HAMAYIM. But the Psukim in Parshas Pinchas, speaking about SUKKOS, the Korbanos Hayoim, the Korban Musaf, Korbanos Hayoim, were different every day on SUKKOS. That's why now Pesach, we didn't say Howl, the full Howl. The Gemara says, because it's not Cholok b'Korban Eisayim. It's the same Korban, right? The Mafter, the Ko'ela, that's that same Korban every single day. As opposed to SUKKOS, every day, B'yoyim Hasheni, the Korban has changed. So when it says the Psukim, the first day, the second day, B'yoyim Hasheni, for an example, every day, B'yoyim Hasheni, how many you bring? You bring 12 parim, kvasim b'rei shana, ba'asar, and then the pasuk says, besides the karbanis, umin chasam v'niskeim kamishpat. What does it mean kamishpat? Depending on what carbon, what nisachim you bring, how much wine, but you brought nisachim. The same as b'yoyim hashlishi, every day. The pasuk also says that there was another nesach, another nisachim that we brought that day. What was that? Of the KORBAN TOMID. Let's go pick any day. V'sarchat milvad. This that we're bringing extra on Yom Tiv, all the karbanis, that's besides oilas hatamid, that we brought every morning a KORBAN TOMID, uminchasa v'niska, the mincha and the nesach. So on Yom Tif, what did you bring? We brought a KORBAN TOMID like every morning, and that KORBAN TOMID came with nesachim, wine. And besides that, we also had karbanis, multiple karbanis on Yom Tif, and that also came with nesachim. The Meshech Chochmah has the following question on the Psukim. On the second day, when the pasuk says Mulvad oilas hatamid uminchasa, speaking about the KORBAN TOMID, that we bring nesachim with the KORBAN TOMID, the pasuk says v'niskehem. We're actually familiar with it. The Gemara speaks about it with the Oisius of Yudam Seir, but these are shinui haloshin on the second day. All the other days it says v'niska. The KORBAN TOMID came v'niska with its nesachim. Not Lashon Rabim, one nesach, one pouring of the wine. The karbanos of the day, it's Lashon Rabim, because if you brought 13 parim, every carbon came with what you poured. However, the KORBAN TOMID was one carbon, came with one nesach, whatever the nesach was. So the Meshech Chochmah asks in Parshas Pinchas, what is it the Lashon Rabim? V'niskehem. What's v'niskehem? Lashon Rabim. We brought the wine. Why? What's Lashon Rabim? These two nesachim.
Asking differently than the Gemara asks?
What does the Gemara ask? What do you mean?
The Gemara points out the extra yud and the extra mel.
So.
Am I confusing the days?
No. Of course, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira that has Mayim, which we're going to get to soon, Behemshach, the Aruch LaNer. But in a point, you're right that they want to make a smach where you know NISUCH HAMAYIM. And the truth is, the Meshech Chochmah is going to get to that also. But the Meshech Chochmah didn't forget about the Gemara. The Meshech Chochmah, we'll see in a minute in his answer what he wants to bring out. But the question is a clear question. He's not being mechadish the diak. The Gemara says the diak. But he's asking, how do you understand? It's beautiful. You have extra mem, yud, mem, mayim. But what does it mean in the Torah? What's the Pirush Amilos V'Niskeyam Lashon Rabbim? Is it a Lashon Rabbim? It's not Rabbim, it's plural. They brought one Nesach. So you might all be looking at me, what do you mean? There was two Nisachim. There was the Nisuch HAMAYIM and the Nisuch HAMAYIM, which I wouldn't say exactly what you're saying, but in that idea that, of course, that's what we're talking about. Now this whole blot, we're talking about Nisuch HAMAYIM. But listen, please, to what the Meshech Chochmah is machadash. If there would be just a pouring of wine and a pouring of water, the Meshech Chochmah says it still shouldn't have not said a B'lashon Rabbim. Why? These are Nesachim for the TOMID. It happens to be on SUKKOS, the Nesachim had multiple different parts. There was water, there was wine. What's the Lashon Rabbim? Even if you're going to tell me, like Yitaka said, we have the drasha of Mayim. Any drasha, it's true, it includes the Mayim. But Lamaisa, it's one Nesach that we brought. Says the Meshech Chochmah, and this is the point for the whole Shiur. This is the takeaway. We'll elaborate on it. But he says like this, an important concept, that it's choluk be'ikroi, meaning to say it's completely different. The din of nisuch hayayin, pouring the wine on the mizbeach that we did by every korban that had nesachim, to the din of nisuch hamayim. It's not just happens to be one is wine, one is water. It's completely different. How is it different? As a matter of fact, at least l'tchatchila, the proper time to do it, when was it done? It was actually done by the korban atomid. They poured both, the wine and the water together. So what's different about it? Nisuch hayayin is a din in the korban. The korban TOMID is machayev, requires to bring wine, to be menasach yayin. Nisuch hamayim that we did on SUKKOS does not have to do with the korban. We poured it at the time of the korban, but it doesn't have to do with the korban. It has to do with the yoim. Now, okay, this is, you want to call a little fancy. We'll see 3 nafkaminas and maybe even more, ladina. But let's get this very clear. We're learning now a full blot all about the din of nisuch hamayim. It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai, but where is it? Merum is in the Torah, different drushes, different ways how it's merum is. The din nisuch hamayim was a din in SUKKOS on the day. All the other nesachim that are brought with a korban is a din in the korban. What's the nafkamina? There's a few nafkaminas clearly ladina. The Meshech Chochmah says it, but the truth is, it's already a Yerushalmi. Number 1, could you bring the nesachim before the korban TOMID? For whatever reason, could you bring it before the korban TOMID? If it's a din in the korban and TOMID, you cannot, because you have to bring it with the TOMID. You can't bring it before. If it's a din in the yoim, the preferable time is to bring it with the TOMID, but you could bring it before. Nafkamina number 2. What happens if you didn't bring it with the TOMID? You forgot, you didn't have it. You could bring it later on, but what's about the next day or the next night? You could bring the nesachim by night. It's a Gemara Menachos. You could bring the nesachim by night. Could you bring the nesachim the next night? You brought a TOMID in the morning. Could you bring the nesachim at night?
was water, most probably not, because it's the next day already.
Gewaldig, excellent.
It's been HAMAYIM.
Very good. So the next night, it's already the next day. Excellent. Very good. But if it's a din in the korban, so for that, these tashlumim, like the Gemara says, afil ad asar yamim. It doesn't have to be that day. Of course, you should bring it with the TOMID. If you didn't bring it with the TOMID, bring it the next day, 3 days later. Very good. But if it's a din in the yom, the next night, you can't bring it. Nafkamina number 3, Rabbi say, what's about the night before? Could you bring NISUCH HAMAYIM, pour the water the night before? You brought up the water, Simchas Beis HaSheva, you're so fired up, and you menasach the mayim already then at night. Is it kosher or is it not kosher?
First one, no?
But it's the opposite. If it's a din in the yom, the second night, like you said, is not good because it's the next day. But if it's a din in the yom, the night before you could bring. Masha Einkein, if it's a din in the korban, just like you can't bring it the morning of, but before the TOMID, so too can you not bring it the night before. It's before the TOMID. So it comes at the opposite. Korban, to bring it the night before, if it's a din in the yom, you could pour the NISUCH HAMAYIM. But if it's a din in the korban, you have to bring it with the korban. If you didn't bring it with the korban, you can bring it later, even 5 days later. But you can't bring it before the korban, not that morning and not the morning before, not the night before. So with this, the Meshech Chochmah explains Vinis Kayem. It's not just one is water and one is wine. It's completely two types of nesachim. One is a nisuch that is connected to the day, and one is a nisuch that's connected to the korban. We just said 3 clear nafkaminas ladina, and with that the Meshech Chochmah is miyashiv why it says v'niskeyem lashon rabim.
So he is going on that side of this material, that it is a din in the day? That's how he comes out?
What's a din in the day? NISUCH HAMAYIM. Yes, yeah. Thank you. Because
So V'niskeyem is referring to the day and the korban, the nesachim of the day and of the korban.
Correct. But we're talking about when we brought the TOMID, we brought 2 nesachim, one of water, one of wine, with the TOMID. Now, if it would be the same thing, so then it happens to be in the ingredients of the nesachim, there's wine and water. Now we're saying, no, it's not just a different ingredient, it's a whole different type of nesach. Of course, we brought it with the TOMID both, but one was a din that was supposed to come mitzad the korban, and one was mitzad the yom.
So how could it be a question of which day you're supposed to mention rain? If it's very clear that NISUCH HAMAYIM happened of a din b'yoma, then obviously it's very clear which day it is, it's the din of b'yoma.
So it's really not so clear.
The last day.
You're asking, so why is there a whole discussion that we're learning when the NISUCH HAMAYIM? So really, I'm not going into it. It's really the Gemara. It's unclear how you know it, what the smach is, when you start, which days. It's not clear, but this part of the Meshech Chochmah, he's not getting involved when the NISUCH started and when we should mention rain in connection to the NISUCH HAMAYIM. He's just saying an overall idea in NISUCH HAMAYIM, which that's what I mentioned in the beginning. I want to speak something general of NISUCH HAMAYIM, but we'll see shortly, I hope to get to it, how it's even connected into the Gemara, the Tanoim in our Gemara. But you have a good point. Once we get into NISUCH HAMAYIM and how mentioning rain connects to that, that's going to depend on which days. Yeah. So very good what you said. My the pshitale to the Meshech Chochmah. He says that NISUCH HAMAYIM is a din of the day. It's a Meshech Chochmah. It's not so simple. It's not so simple at all. Meshech Chochmah says for Pshitas, the Heilige Meshech Chochmah, the Binyan Siyan, the Baal Orach Laner, he had a tshuva say for Binyan Siyan. He starts off his tshuva and he says, like this, he's a din. If you can't bring a korban, you learn about the korban, it's Ki'ilu Hikrif. So SUKKOS, we can't be Menasach HAMAYIM, so I want to learn about NISUCH HAMAYIM. So the Binyan Siyan says, I want to understand the din of NISUCH HAMAYIM on SUKKOS. Is it a din in the Yoim, or is it a din in the KORBAN? Like what you mentioned, the Meshech Chochmah says it's a din in the Yoim, and that's how he answers this question. The Binyan Tzion says, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. And the Binyan Tzion actually brings a fourth nafkamina. What's the fourth nafkamina? What happens if there's no KORBAN TOMID? Unfortunately, for whatever reason, they didn't bring a KORBAN TOMID. Could you still be menasech HAMAYIM? Yayin you don't bring, because yayin comes with the KORBAN. If there's no KORBAN, then there's no nesachim. But what's about NISUCH HAMAYIM? Are you menasech the water? So he says it would depend on the shaila. If it's a din in the yoyim, you do. Of course, the preferable time is to bring it with the Tomid. If there's no Tomid, maybe still bring it at that time or bring it at a different time. But of course, you menasech HAMAYIM. However, if the din NISUCH HAMAYIM is a din in the KORBAN, if it's a din in the KORBAN, then definitely you would not bring it, just like you're not menasech hayayin, a fourth nafkamina ladina. So he says, the Aruch LaNer says it's a machlekes rishonim, the Binyan Tzion, Baal Aruch LaNer, it's a machlekes rishonim. The Ritva, just want to quote the lashon of the Ritva inside. The Ritva, just a few words. Holei Tikshri, he's arguing on the Ravid, but says the Ritva, the NISUCH HAMAYIM einoi choshev bo mazevach, as mefurish as it gets. Shechoyves hayoimhu v'loi choyves hazevach klal. The Ritva says that the water NISUCH HAMAYIM on SUKKOS is nothing to do with the KORBAN, it's a choyves hayoim. The Rambam also holds like that, because the Rambam says that if you bring it the night before, it's kosher. The Rambam also holds that it's a din in the Yom. Mi'idach, the Briskerov in stencil, in Menachos has a whole long shtickle, he declares the same shaila, and he brings a rayim, a furish, Toisus on our blot, Amid Beis, you boil who the top Toisus, you look clearly in Toisus, the end of Toisus is mefurish, that you could bring it the first night, the night before. So that means that it's a din, it's a choyves hayom. Mi'idach, the Ravid that argues, there's not enough time to go into the Ravid, how you see it, but the Ravid argues and learns that it's a choyves hakarban. So what my the pshita lay to the Meshech Chochmah, it's a machlek, or the Binyan Tzion says it's a machlekes rishonim. I don't know exactly how to answer the Meshech Chochmah's question. Maybe you're going to say that it's still two nesachim, even though they're both in KORBAN. But al kapanim, it's a machlekes rishonim. If we could go a step further, and with this we're going to conclude. We started off, the Meshech Chochmah says that pouring water at the Mizbeach is a choyves hayoim. The Binyan Tzion says it's a machlekes rishonim. And now we're going to go to Aruch LaNer, the same mechaber. The Aruch LaNer also declares the same shaila, yesh lacher. And the Aruch LaNer says it's a machlekes tanoim. If it's a choyves hayoim or it's a choyves hakarban. Where's the machlekes tanoim? In our Gemara, the whole Amid Beis and Daf Gimel Amid Aleph, depending on from what pasuk the Tana shines the light that we see the concept of NISUCH HAMAYIM. Shitas Rabbi Akiva from the Lashon Rabbim in Sacheha, the Lashon Rabbim. So if it's the Lashon Rabbim, meaning to say is they're both the same. Not like the Meshech Chochmah, they're both the same, as well as Hasech, Nesach, they're both talking about the Nesachim by the Tomid, it's the same thing. However, Shitas Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira learns a smach of NISUCH HAMAYIM from where? Not from one particular place by the KORBAN Tomid. He pulls letters. These extra mem, extra yud, extra mem. So for that, it's not connected in particular to the KORBAN Tomid. Therefore, he says, Shitas Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira is that the NISUCH HAMAYIM that was brought is not connected to the KORBAN Tomid. So to sum it up and to conclude, most of today's shiur was in regard to the NISUCH HAMAYIM that we're learning. We learned this whole balat. Is it a din in the KORBAN TOMID just like the wine, the NISUCH HAYAYIN? Or is it its own din not to do with the KORBAN? It's a din in the yoim. And as we saw, 4 nafkeminas ladina. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
Very nice.